Today I want to talk to you and tell you a story that I recently read and found. I have it here on my computer here, and it tells the story of Dr. Frank Merrifield, who was touring at that stage Tewksbury Institute, when on his way out he bumps into an elderly floor maid. So there's a rather awkward situation, and in trying to rectify this situation, he starts to ask her some questions. How long had she worked there? She explained she'd worked there since the institute had opened, on and on. And so he said to her, "What can you tell me about this place?" And she says to him, "Well, let me show you something," and takes him down to the basement of this institute, to an old part of the building. And there she points out to him a few cells, literally cells, with bars and with everything else. And she points to that, and she says, "That is the cage where they used to keep Annie Sullivan." Now, you may be wondering, who's Annie Sullivan? Good question, because we will try and answer that question for you in an interesting manner. And he asks the same question: who is Annie? We all want to know who this Annie is. And Annie was a young girl and was brought to this particular institute at a young age because she was absolutely inconsolable. No one could handle her, and the family had just basically given up on her. No one could do anything for her. She would kick and scream and throw the food, and this is where they kept her, in the cell. And the nurses and the staff, they couldn't get near her because she would react, with absolute kind of crazy, quite frankly. And as I said, no one could get near her. She would throw food back at the staff and people and cry and make a huge ruckus as she was kept in this particular place. And this cleaner that was there, that this Dr. Frank Merrifield bumped into, was young herself at that point in time. And so she felt really sorry for this young girl locked in this cage, and no one could get near her, just living in her own desperate world that she's living in. And so she began to think, it must be terrible to be in such a situation. How can I perhaps help her in some kind of a way? So she decides that she's going to cook some brownies. Goes home, cooks the brownies, brings them to there, and she lays the brownies like right near the cage so she can reach them, and quickly retreats just in case she gets the brownies thrown at her. And so, and of course, this Annie reaches through and gets a hold of some of these brownies and loves them, enjoys them. Of course, who doesn't like brownies? And so she begins to talk with her slowly and bring her some more, and gets her to laugh a few times. And some of the nursing staff see this, and they go to the doctors and say, "Listen, this is what's happening with this cleaning lady and Annie." And so they ask her, this Annie, the cleaning lady, a young lady at that point in time herself, "Could you help us with this situation with Annie?" And so what they did was they got her to go into the cage, into the little cell, and hold Annie's hand and explain to her, calm her down, and tell her the doctors just want to examine to make sure she's okay. And she would accept that. Of course, that is when they discover that she's almost blind. And that's why, with the fear and anxiety and all of that surrounding her, back in those days, it couldn't have been very easy, not like today with all the technology. And so they discover that she's mostly blind, and this is part of the reason. And anyway, cut a long story short, they're able to help her. They're actually restored through some simple surgical procedures most of her sight. Annie leaves the institute and goes on to become a teacher herself. Amazing story, of a woman who is behind the bars and comes out of that prison in a spectacular way, both literally and figuratively. Anyway, so one day, this Annie comes back to the Institute to see if she can try and help. Maybe there are others that need this kind of help. And the director tells her of a lady, a young woman, very similar to her in her background, that the family could do absolutely nothing with. She would kick and scream and throw food at people and bite them. And actually, they thought that she was really quite crazy. That's how they kind of considered her to be. But the family didn't want to put her in an institute, and so they rather put up with this, ongoing crisis within themselves as a family, and they're absolute at a wit's end, and they write to this Tewksbury institution and ask, is there any kind of help we can get for our daughter who is just, we can't handle her at all. And so this is how Annie Sullivan becomes a lifelong companion of Helen Keller, which I'm sure you have heard about before. It's a wonderful story. It's an amazing story because Annie Sullivan became that lifelong friend of Helen Keller and realized that, of course, they knew that Helen Keller had a sickness at about 1.5 years of age, lost her sight, became deaf, and so she's living in this closed world. And Annie begins to teach her how to read, how to communicate, and of course the rest is history. Contrary to popular belief, Helen Keller did not win a Nobel Prize, although she was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 1954. She did, however, win the Presidential Medal of Honor. It's the highest civilian honor you can get in the US. An amazing story. She won 2 Oscars, one herself for a documentary she made about her blindness and deafness and that whole world, and another one, in fact, another 2 Oscars were won about her life story by actors who played her. Amazing woman. As we all know, Helen Keller went around traveling nation after nation. She visited the troops on the war front, encouraged people, laid her life down. And when she was asked, Helen Keller, that is, who had the greatest impact upon your life, she said, Annie Sullivan. And Annie is standing right there, and she interrupted her and said, no, Helen, the woman who had the greatest influence on both our lives was the floor maid at Tewksbury Institute. And so that's how this floor maid is honored, because of her impact into Annie's life, who then impacted Helen Keller. So I told you this story because these are people under extraordinary circumstances that refuse to remain ordinary. They dig deep within themselves to help another human being. And we all have that ability. God has put that within us. We're not meant to just be simply ordinary when it comes to reaching out a helping hand to another person. I think as I look at the news, and I'm sure you would agree with me, the mad, sad, bad news that goes on, whether you're left or right left or left or right left, whatever you are politically speaking, there are these stories that pop up from people that has nothing to do with their political aspirations or their beliefs, but they help another human being. And I think that to me is an absolute key for the wonderful people of America. We come from a foreign nation. And so when we came here, we found the warm-hearted, generous people that stretched out their hands to help us when we came to this nation, and we went through all the procedures to become eventually citizens. And they were from all spectrums of life, from all political beliefs, None of that counted. What did count was these individuals reaching out to myself, my family, my two daughters, our two daughters at that time. And I will never forget the generosity and the help of these people. And these are just ordinary people being extraordinary, just like this floor maid who cleaned. She was a nothing and a nobody, yet certainly Annie Sullivan remembered her and reminded Helen Keller of her as well. And so I want to make an appeal to you today. Don't consider your life to be nothing. Don't consider your life to just be ordinary. It's not. You have the ability to do extraordinary things, just like these people. Now, we might not be an Annie Sullivan. I'm sure we're not certainly falling into the category we may think of a Helen Keller. But we can identify, at least I can, with the floor maid at Tewksbury Institute. An ordinary nobody who steps up to the plate. And that's what you and I can do, because we have that within us to be able to step up and help another fellow being. Help join in with something larger than ourselves, something more important than the complaints and the finger pointing and the criticism of whether it be the neighbor or someone sitting in Washington. We all have the ability to criticize. We also have the ability to rather roll up our sleeves, put hand to plow, and start with our next door neighbor. Walking down the aisle at a local store and someone drops something, bending down to pick it up for them. Offering a lady a seat in the bus when there's no other room. How many times have I not seen people sitting there while an elderly lady will be standing holding on to the rail? There's so many things we can do, folk, to help people around us. Let's look for those opportunities. And you know, the funny thing about it is what you give out comes back to you. As you bless others, guess what happens to you? You become blessed. And so this little message is just a message of encouragement, because you have it within you, just like this floor maid. You have it within you, an ordinary person going about her life, seeing an opportunity to help someone else. Maybe it would be taking brownies to someone down the road who's maybe feeling a little lonely and is in problems. Maybe it is going to the next door neighbor and saying, I see you've got a need. Can I help? Can I mow your front lawn for you? Maybe it is one of those many hundreds of opportunities that present to themselves to us during the week that we walk right past and ignore. Perhaps if we were to stop for a moment and help just one of those situations in the week, not only will we begin to see that life is bigger than us, but we as an ordinary person have an extraordinary opportunity to be available, be of help, be a blessing. God desires for you to be a blessing. That's why He put you on this earth. Muhammad Ali famously once said that the rent we pay to live on earth is service to others. And so I want to encourage you this day that you would look out for those opportunities, because you are extraordinary. Don't let anyone tell you you're not. You are. And so make this a special week ahead of you. Do something for someone and be part of the narrative that's bringing America back to the great nation she is, in our neighborhoods, right here where we are every day. Thank you for joining me here on New Life, at New Life on Sunday mornings, 10 a.m. Do come back as we tell stories, talk about spirituality, and discuss things that are important for you and I to grow as human beings. God bless you, and my prayer for you is that God would provide you opportunity to be the blessing you are this week, and whoever and wherever you go, and whoever you happen to bump into, just like this Dr. Frank Mayfield. Thank you, God bless you, and we'll see you next week.